Chapter 17 Colonialism in Latin America, Asia and Africa. Expansion of Europe and early colonialism. Some 600 years ago, the people of the world traveled very little. They usually traveled on the backs of horses or camels or by small boats and ships, which only sailed along seacoast. However, the contact between peoples and countries began to increase as traders traveled far and wide to buy exotic goods and sell them at high prices. Most of the trade routes connecting Europe and Asia around 1400 were controlled by Muslim kingdoms, especially the Ottoman Empire, which was constantly at war with the European Christian powers. The Italians were able to work out an understanding with the Arab traders who brought Asian goods to the Alexandria and sold them to the Italians. As the traders and governments of Western Europe like Holland, Spain, Portugal and England realized the importance of this trade, they wanted to find faster and easier routes to countries like India and China without passing through regions controlled by Italian traders. European colonies in America. Columbus landed up on what today are called the West Indies, the islands of the coast of South America. After Columbus, the Spanish government sent several expeditions to conquer America and plunder it. They expected to find gold and silver mines and vast quantities of these precious metals with local kings. As the news of the natural resources of America reached the people of Europe, a stream of land-hungry settlers set out to America. They drove off the native people and took over their lands. They therefore began to transport large number of African slaves who had been captured from the interiors of Africa by European traders and their agents. Latin America. During the 300 years period from 1500 to 1800, most of Central and South America was brought under the control of Spain and Portugal. Since Spanish and Portuguese languages are considered offshoots of Latin, these countries are called Latin American countries. In most of the Spanish-ruled countries, all power was concentrated in the hand of Supreme Council located in Madrid. This council appointed high officials and nobles from Spain to govern the colonies. The economies of the colonies were controlled by Spain in such a way as to serve as source of inexpensive labor and natural resources and never planted to spark internal development. This situation led to monopolistic trade relations for the benefit of the economies of the colonial power. To ensure these monopolistic privileges, the colonial powers forcibly shaped the social and economical dynamics of the colonies. The people of the Spanish colonies, including old Spanish settlers, disliked the control exercised by Spanish nobles over them, and a series of revolts broke out against Spain from 1810 in Latin America. By 1820s, United States of America had emerged a major economic and political power. It began to regard the South America as a sphere of its influence and actively discouraged any European power to establish control over this area. European colonialism in Asia. Most countries of Asia like India, China and Japan were different from Latin American countries in many ways. Most of the Asian countries were densely populated by prosperous peasant communities and were governed by powerful empires defended by vast armies. Thus, when the European powers sought to attack the Mughal Empire, they were repeatedly defeated by Mughal armies. However, the Europeans were able to establish power over some important ports like Goa, from where they controlled the oceanic trade. The Portuguese, for example, established in 16th century a seaborne empire over the Indian Ocean. All ships traveling on the Arabian Sea or Indian Ocean or Bay of Bengal had to pay a special tribute to the Portuguese. If they did not, they were attacked and looted. China. China, like India, was one of the most populous countries of the world and had a powerful empire. It was also further east of India, and the Europeans could not establish control over it the way they could conquer Latin America or Indonesia. This led to what are called the Opium Wars, which were fought between China and England, which was supported by the other European powers between 1840 to 42. China was defeated by England, which imposed a series of unequal treaties. These treaties allowed England to trade with China without restrictions and allowed the English to establish trading enclaves in China in which only English laws could be in force. England also forced China to give it the most favored nation treatment, by which any concession given to any other country would be automatically applied to England too. Colonialism in Africa. Till almost the middle of 19th century, the Europeans showed little interest in establishing colonial power in Africa. Between the 16th and early 19th century, it was just used as a source of slaves who were sold off in America. Some powers like England used crucial parts of African coast like the Cape of Good Hope as landing points to refresh supplies to their ships on their way to India and China. These powers were of the view that Africa had little to offer the colonial powers in terms of trade. A virtual scramble for Africa began in 1870s. In 1870s, only about 10% of Africa was under the colonial powers, and within 40 years, almost the entire continent, with the exception of Ethiopia and a couple of small states. Ethiopia was able to decisively defeat Italy in a war and thus became the only traditional non-European empire to defeat an European army. The experience of colonization, some case studies. Congo. From 1860 to 1874, Stanley, the explorer, was secretly sent by King Leopold II of Belgium to the Congo region, where he made treaties with several African chiefs and persuaded them to give up territories to him. To this territory, he added the kingdom of Katanga by killing its king. By 1882, Leopold's African territories grew up to 23 lakh square kilometers, about 75 times larger than Belgium. It was called the Congo Free State. South Africa. The English had established an outpost in the Cape of Good Hope to help the passing ships to rest and replenish food supplies. Some Dutch farmers had settled in this area to cultivate and sell the produce to the passing ships. They came into conflict with the local African people whom they tried to drive away from their lands. They were called Boers. When the British began to increase their control over the sea, the Boers were dissatisfied and migrated to new areas and even established independent republics. When the gold and diamond mines were discovered in those parts, a large number of people from Europe and Africa and India migrated to South Africa and wanted to gain from the mining boom. You would have noticed that from 1400 onwards, almost the whole of America, Africa, Asia and Australia, that is all continents other than Europe, was colonized by European powers. They established their political and economic control over these countries and people, and transformed their lives. And they were not colonized in the same manner or led to similar results. You saw how in America a large part of native population was killed and plundered and enslaved. The European powers thus changed the economic and social lives of the people of the colonies in such a way as to suit the needs of European powers. However, at the same time, they could not stop new ideas of freedom and democracy and nationalism from reaching the colonies. These ideas gave the people of colonies a new powder and identity with which to fight colonialism and eventually win freedom.
మా వీడియో గనుక మీకు నచ్చినట్లయితే లైక్ చేయండి, షేర్ చేయండి. ఇలాంటి మరిన్ని వీడియోస్ కోసం మా ఛానల్ని సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేసుకోవడం మాత్రం మర్చిపోకండి. థ్యాంక్ యూ ఫర్ వాచింగ్.